Jared never thought life would bring him this far from Earth. He had been a boy once, running through green fields and listening to his mother's voice in the evening. But that world was gone. Earth had burned in wars that seemed endless. Wars, fought over land and power until there was nothing left but ash and broken skies. The survivors scattered across the stars like seeds thrown into the wind. Jared was one of those seeds. He carried only a few memories, a few items, and a heart too heavy for his young body. He arrived on Luthera Prime, a world so different from Earth that it felt like stepping into a dream. The skies were wide and tall, painted in shades of violet and gold. The air carried a faint hum, like the planet itself was alive and breathing. The people of Luthera were taller than humans, their skin glowing faintly with inner light. Their eyes burned with strange colors, some like frozen blue, some like molten gold. To Jared, they were both beautiful and intimidating. The refugee office gave him a small stipend and a list of names. He was told to find shelter quickly because the nights on Luthera Prime were cold, and humans were too fragile to endure them, alone. That was how he found the house, the one with tall arches and walls that seemed to glow faintly in the dusk. And that was how he met Sira, the landlady. Sira was unlike anyone Jared had seen before. Her height alone made him feel small, but her presence carried more than just size. She was quiet, almost distant, as though her mind was always elsewhere. Her eyes were pale, like twin shards of crystal, and her voice carried both strength and softness. "I rent a room," she told him when they first met. Her words were careful, accented, but clear enough. I need a place," Jared replied, clutching the strap of his worn pack. "Just something small. I can pay a little." She studied him for a long moment. It was not the cold look of someone who disliked him, but rather the careful watch of someone measuring weight, like deciding whether a branch could hold another bird. Then she nodded. "There is space upstairs," she said. "One room. You may stay. Keep it clean. Do not bring trouble here." Jared agreed quickly. He would have agreed to anything, as long as he had a roof and walls between him and the sharp Lutheran wind. The first nights in the house were strange. The walls glowed faintly, alive with energy. The air carried the scent of alien flowers that opened only in the dark. Jared stayed quiet, never speaking more than he had to. He cooked his simple meals in silence and kept his small room neat. But Sira was observant. She noticed details others would not. She saw how Jared sometimes sat awake long after midnight, staring at a small box he kept under his bed. The box was old, dented, and always locked. He never let it out of his sight, even when he slept. Once when she passed by his door, she heard faint sounds, like soft strings being plucked, like whispers of something half forgotten. At first she thought it was a human weapon. Refugees often carried hidden things, objects from their ruined worlds. But this boy, there was something different in the way he guarded it. He did not look like a fighter. His eyes carried grief, not rage. Jared, too, noticed her watchfulness. He caught her gaze sometimes, standing silently in the hallway, her glowing skin making her look like a figure carved of starlight. He wondered what she thought of him, the last fragment of a broken world. But he never spoke of the box, and she never asked. Still, the silence between them was heavy. In every house creak and every passing glance, an unspoken question lingered. What does he hide? The house became a place of quiet tension, where two lonely souls lived under one roof, an alien landlady guarding her dignity, and a human refugee, guarding a secret he could not yet share. And deep under his bed, locked in that small box, rested the last piece of earth Jared carried with him. The secret that one day would change everything. The days passed quietly inside Sira's house. Jared kept to himself, living as though he wished to take up no space at all. He moved softly, spoke rarely, and worked odd jobs in the city to pay his rent. Still, every evening he returned to that single room upstairs, where the little box sat beneath his bed like a sleeping heart. Sira noticed everything. She had lived alone for many years, and silence had taught her to read the smallest details. She noticed how Jared's hands lingered on the lock of that box before he left the room each day. She noticed how his eyes softened whenever he looked at it, though sadness always followed soon after, and she noticed how sometimes, late at night, he would pull it out and sit with it in his lap, his shoulders trembling as though the weight of memory was too much to carry alone. Sira was not unkind, but she was cautious. Her people had a saying, "Every refugee carries two things, what they lost and what they hide." She wondered if the boy's box contained something dangerous, a weapon, a forbidden tool. On Luthera Prime, humans were still strangers, and any hint of trouble could bring the authorities to her door. One evening she found him sitting in the common room, the box on the floor beside his chair. His fingers tapped nervously against the lid, like he was debating whether to open it. The fire from the house's central crystal bathed him in soft light. "What is inside?" Sira finally asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She did not mean harm, but she needed truth. Jared's body stiffened. He looked up at her, then down at the box. For a moment, silence filled the air between them. "It's not what you think," he whispered. "Then what is it?" She pressed, gently. "You guard it as if it were your life." He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "It is my life," he admitted. "All that I have left of it." Her gaze lingered on him. "Is it a weapon?" Jared did not answer. His silence spoke louder than words. To him, the box was more than wood and metal. It was the last tie to his past, to his world, to everything he had lost. He could not bear the thought of her seeing what lay inside. Not yet. Sira leaned back, studying him. She was tall, her glowing skin reflecting the fire's soft hues. Her presence filled the room, but she did not press further. She simply said, "If it is a danger, you cannot keep it here. This house must remain safe." Jared's chest tightened. For a fleeting second, fear surged through him. What if she forced him to surrender it? What if she took the last piece of earth from his hands? He could not let that happen. "I promise you," he said quickly, his voice shaking. "It will never harm anyone. I would never—" "I couldn't." Sira tilted her head, her crystalline eyes narrowing. There was no lie in his voice, only sorrow, deep and endless. She decided to let the matter rest, for now. But curiosity had taken root inside her heart, and it would not be easily silenced. That night, Jared returned to his room and held the box tightly against his chest. His fingers brushed the scarred wood, tracing lines that his father once carved. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he was back on Earth, sitting by a window, listening to his father play soft melodies while the world outside was still whole. A tear slipped down his cheek. The box was not just a container. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how far he had been thrown from home, humanity's spirit would not vanish with the ashes of Earth. Down the hall, Sira lay awake in her own chamber, her mind restless. She had seen weapons of steel, weapons of fire, weapons that tore ships apart. But never had she seen someone hold an object with such reverence, such aching tenderness. "What are you hiding, human?" she whispered into the dark. "And why? Does it feel like it is breaking you?" Neither of them knew it yet, but the answer would change both their lives. For inside that locked box was not destruction, but creation. Not a blade, but a song. And soon, the quiet house on Luthera Prime would no longer be quiet at all. For many days, the box remained a silent mystery between them. Jared carried it like a piece of his own soul, and Sira, though she wished to know, held back her questions. Yet the house was not made only of walls and doors. It was alive with silence, and silence often spoke louder than words. One evening, rain fell over Luthera Prime. The sky turned dark and heavy drops rattled against the glowing windows. Jared sat alone in his room, the box resting on his knees. His hands trembled as he touched the lock as though the storm outside was mirrored inside his heart. He heard a soft sound. A knock. Sira stood in the doorway, tall and calm, her pale eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The sound of the storm keeps me awake, she said quietly. And you also do not sleep. Jared gave a small, tired smile. Sleep doesn't come easy anymore. Her gaze dropped to the box. You hold it as if it is the only thing that keeps you breathing. Jared hesitated. For weeks he had hidden this part of himself, guarding it against judgment or loss. But tonight, with the storm pressing close and loneliness cutting deep, he felt something inside him break open. He took a slow breath. Do you want to see? He asked. Sierra blinked in surprise. Her first instinct was to say yes, but she held her tongue. She had learned patience, and she knew the boy would only open his heart if he truly wished to. So she nodded, saying simply, If you are ready. With shaking fingers, Jared unlocked the box. The lid creaked open, and inside lay something Sierra had never seen before. It was not a gun, nor a blade, nor any tool of war. It was long, made of wood worn smooth by touch, with 6 thin strings stretched across its body. Sierra tilted her head. What is this? Jared's hand touched it with reverence. It's called a guitar, he whispered. On Earth, it was used to make music. Music, she repeated softly. The word was known to her. Her people had their own songs, their own rhythms that rose with the tides and the crystals in their cities. But something about the way Jared spoke the word made it feel heavier, older. He lifted the guitar from the box and rested it against his body. His fingers moved clumsily at first, brushing against the strings. A soft sound filled the room, warm and trembling. Then another and another. The notes were uneven, but they carried something alive, something that made the air itself seem to pause. Sierra's glowing eyes widened. It speaks, she whispered, though she knew it was not speaking. It was sound, yet it was more. It was memory. It was feeling. Jared closed his eyes and let his fingers find a slow rhythm. The storm outside roared, but inside the room, a fragile song was born. His voice joined, soft and cracked, carrying words she did not fully understand but could feel, all the same. It was a song of longing, of distance, of a world that was gone but still lived inside his chest. Sierra felt something stir within her. Lutherans were not quick to cry, but the sound pulled at her heart like unseen hands. She had never heard anything so raw, so human, so painfully alive. When the last note faded, the room was silent, except for the storm. Jared lowered the guitar, his eyes wet. This, he said hoarsely, is my weapon, not against people, but against forgetting, against despair. It's the only fight I have left. Sierra sat quietly, her chest rising and falling. At last, she said, I thought you hid something dangerous. But this is beautiful. It is not a weapon. Jared gave a broken smile. It saved me more times than any weapon could, and maybe it can save others too. Sierra looked at him, truly looked. For the first time, she saw not just a refugee, not just a broken human boy, but a spark. Small, fragile, yet bright enough to light even the darkest corners of her silent house. That night, as the storm slowly passed, the air between them was no longer heavy with questions. It was filled with something new, something unspoken, yet deeply felt. And Sierra knew that nothing in her quiet home would ever be the same again. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in the walls. The house felt different after that night. Softer, warmer, as though Jared's music had left an echo inside every corner. Sierra moved through her halls with a new awareness. She had always thought her home was large, but also empty. Now she felt a living presence inside it, carried by the boy's fragile songs. For Jared, the act of opening the box had been both painful and freeing. For years, the guitar had stayed hidden, pulled out only when loneliness crushed him beyond endurance. Now, for the first time since Earth's fall, someone else had heard it. And not just heard, but listened. That mattered more than words could say. A few days later, as evening settled, Sira approached his door. She knocked gently, and when he opened it, she asked, "Will you play again?" Jared blinked in surprise. "You want to hear it?" She nodded once, firmly. "Yes." He hesitated, but the hope in her glowing eyes was something he couldn't refuse. So he carried the guitar into the common room. The fire crystals burned softly, casting orange and gold across the walls. Sira sat near him, tall and silent, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Jared strummed the strings, testing their sound. His fingers were slow at first, clumsy with nervousness. Then he began to play, not just notes, but something fuller, something alive. The song rose in gentle waves, carrying with it the weight of memory. Jared sang in a low voice, rough but filled with feeling. His words spoke of Earth's fields, of skies painted in blue, of laughter echoing in the streets of cities now gone. The melody carried both joy and grief, hope and loss. Sira closed her eyes. She did not understand every word, but the emotion crossed all language. She felt herself standing on strange green grass beneath a sun she had never seen, feeling the warmth of a world that no longer existed. She felt his sorrow as though it were her own. When Jared's voice cracked with pain, something inside her chest ached. When his notes lifted with hope, something inside her glowed brighter. Tears slid down her cheeks, though she had not known she could cry this way. Her people were strong, trained to hide weakness. But this was not weakness. It was truth, raw and unhidden. When the final note faded, silence filled the room. Jared lowered the guitar, ashamed of the tears in his own eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It's not much. The strings are old. My voice is broken. It's all I have left." Sira leaned forward, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Do not apologize. What you gave me was not small. It was alive." Her words struck him harder than any praise. Alive. That was what he had always feared he was losing. Each day he felt more like a shadow of the boy he used to be. But when he played, when he sang, he felt the spark return. And now someone else had seen it. That night, Jared played again. A softer tune. One meant for healing, rather than mourning. Sira listened until the fire crystals dimmed and the house grew quiet. For the first time in many years, she did not feel alone in her own halls. In the days that followed, she began to ask him more questions about music. Did all humans sing? Why did you carry this instrument instead of something else? What do the words mean? Jared answered as best as he could. He told her of festivals, of songs sung by crowds, of lullabies whispered to children at night. He explained that music was not only sound, it was memory, identity, strength. Sira listened with the patience of someone discovering a hidden world. And each time he played, she sat closer, not as a landlady watching her tenant, but as a soul reaching for another. One evening after a song ended, she whispered, "You said this is your weapon. I think it is also a bridge." Jared looked at her, his eyes shining in the firelight. "A bridge?" "Yes," she said. "Between what is lost and what can still be found. Between you and me." Her words lingered in the air like music itself, gentle and unshakable. And in that moment, Jared realized something he had almost forgotten. Songs could build, not just mourn. They could connect hearts, even across the vast gulf between human and alien. The house was no longer just walls and rooms. It was becoming something else, something alive, filled with sound, with memory, with the fragile beginnings of hope. And it all began with the first song. Jared's music did not stay hidden for long. At first, it was only Sira who listened. She would sit quietly, her tall frame still as stone, while his fingers coaxed fragile melodies from the guitar. But sound is like water. It finds its way through cracks. One evening, The neighbors passing by Sierra's tall windows slowed their steps. They heard something soft drifting into the night air, something unlike the metallic rhythms of their own music. It was sorrow and hope, twined together. Soon, whispers spread. The human makes songs. He sings of things lost. It feels like remembering. Other refugees came, curious. They stood in the doorway shyly, asking to listen. Jared hesitated, but Sierra nodded her permission. Slowly, the crowd grew. A few at first, then dozens, sitting on the floors of the once empty house. They listened to Jared sing of oceans that no longer touched human feet, of skies painted in colors only Earth could make. Many wept, though they did not understand the words. The music spoke without needing translation. Jared felt fear each time he played for them. His hands shook, his voice cracked. But each time, he saw the faces lifted toward him, and he understood. This was not only for him anymore, it was for all of them. His songs gave shape to grief that had no voice, and in return the people gave him their silence, their trust, their tears. But the gatherings did not remain unnoticed. Luthera's city leaders began to hear reports. A human refugee drawing crowds, stirring hearts with strange earth music. To them this sounded dangerous. Lutherans valued order above all, and nothing unsettled order more than unshaped emotion. A song could move more people than a speech, could ignite more fire than a weapon. One evening, Sierra was called before a council officer. His robe shimmered with authority, his eyes sharp as frost. "You allow the human to gather people in your house," he said. "This must stop." Sierra stood tall, her voice calm but firm. "He is no threat. He only sings." The officer's lip curled. "Songs are sharper than blades when they feed unrest. Do not mistake softness for harmlessness. If he continues, consequences will fall on you as well." Sierra returned home with her heart heavy. She found Jared sitting with the guitar, his fingers brushing the strings absent-mindedly. He looked up, sensing her unease. "What did they say?" he asked quietly. She did not soften the truth. "They fear your music, they call it dangerous." Jared's chest tightened. He lowered his gaze to the guitar. "I knew this would happen. Everywhere we've gone, humans are told to be small, to be silent. But this," he touched the strings gently, "this is the only voice I have left." Sierra studied him. His shoulders were thin, his hands rough, his eyes tired beyond his years. He was not a soldier. He was not armed with fire or steel. And yet she saw now why her people were afraid. Not of the boy himself, but of what he awakened in others. That night, the house was full again. Refugees sat shoulder to shoulder, waiting. Jared hesitated, remembering the officer's warning. But when he saw their eyes, hungry, aching, desperate for hope, he could not remain silent. He lifted the guitar and began to play. This song was different. It was not only about Earth's loss, it was about endurance, about finding strength even when the world has turned to ash. His voice carried higher, steadier, until the very walls of the house seemed to hum with it, and the people, unable to stop themselves, began to hum with him. Softly at first, then louder. A chorus rose, unplanned, many voices joining one fragile guitar. Sierra stood in the doorway, watching. Her heart swelled as the music filled every corner of her home. She remembered the council officer's cold warning, but she did not move to silence them. Instead, she lifted her chin proudly. "If this is dangerous," she thought, "then let it be." When the last note ended, the room stayed quiet, filled with the warmth of shared breath and unspoken unity. For the first time in many years, the refugees did not feel scattered. They felt like a people again. And for the first time, Sierra realized that Jared's weapon was not meant to destroy. It was meant to heal. And healing, in a wounded world, could be the most dangerous power of all. The nights in Sierra's house grew brighter, not with light but with voices. Every evening more people came. Humans, aliens, workers, wanderers, anyone who longed for something more than silence. Jared's songs filled the halls, and with them came laughter, tears and a strange kind of hope. But hope is something rulers fear. One night, when the fire crystals glowed softly and the room was filled with listeners, heavy boots struck the doorstep. The door swung open and Lutheran soldiers stormed inside. Their armor shone with cold light, their faces hard as stone. "Enough!" one barked, his voice echoing against the walls. "This gathering is forbidden." The room froze. Children clutched their parents and voices died to silence. Jared's hand trembled over the strings of his guitar. He had feared this moment, and now it stood before him in steel and authority. The lead soldier's eyes swept the room until they landed on Jared. "You," he spat. "The human. Stand." Slowly, Jared rose, clutching the guitar to his chest, like a shield. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to meet their gaze. "What crime have I committed?" he asked softly. "You stir unrest. You spread dangerous fire through song. The council has ordered your silence. That thing," the soldier pointed at the guitar with disgust, "will be destroyed." The words struck Jared like a blade. His knees weakened, but before he could speak, one soldier stepped forward, lifting his boot to smash the instrument, and then Sira moved. She stepped between Jared and the soldier, her tall figure glowing with a fierce light. Her voice rang sharp, each word like a strike of thunder. "This house is mine, what lives in it is under my protection. You will not touch it." The soldiers faltered. Sira was not just any landlady. Her family name still carried weight, her voice still carried authority. Yet defiance was dangerous. The lead soldier narrowed his eyes. "Do not mistake loyalty for immunity," he growled. "If you shield him, you share his punishment." Sira's pale eyes blazed brighter. "So be it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. People stood, slowly at first, then all together. Dozens of voices rose, not in song, but in unity. Mothers, fathers, workers, refugees, all standing behind Sira and Jared. The soldiers shifted uneasily. They had expected fear, not resistance. And then Jared did something no one expected. His hands shook, but he lifted the guitar and strummed a single chord. The sound rang out, clear and strong, cutting through the tense silence. The crowd answered. First a hum, low and trembling, then voices rising together. It was not a planned song, not one they all knew, but it grew like fire catching dry grass. Humans sang words of earth, and Lutherans added their own tones, strange and haunting. Together it became something greater, something unstoppable. The soldiers shouted for silence, but their voices were drowned beneath the swell of music. Jared sang louder, his broken voice carrying raw power. Every strum of the guitar was a heartbeat, every note a promise. Sira stood tall beside him, her glowing skin shining brighter with each chord, as if the song itself gave her strength. She looked at the soldiers and saw fear in their eyes, not of weapons but of unity. The soldiers could not move forward. They could not silence what was no longer just one boy's song but the voice of many. When the final note ended, the silence that followed was heavy and unshakable. The soldiers, outnumbered not by blades but by courage, backed away. The lead one spat on the floor, his face twisted in frustration. "This is not the end," he warned. "Your music will burn this world apart." But even as they marched out, everyone in the house knew the truth. Something had already begun that could not be undone. Jared lowered the guitar, his arms trembling with exhaustion. For a moment he feared Sira would be angry with him for bringing such danger into her home. But when he turned to her, he saw only pride in her crystalline eyes. "You did not just play music tonight," she said quietly. "You lit a fire." And, deep in Jared's heart, he understood. There was no turning back now. The weapon he had carried in silence had awakened, and the galaxy would hear it. After that night, nothing returned to the way it had been. The soldiers left, but their warning echoed through the city. Everyone expected fear to silence the people, but instead, the opposite happened. Word spread quickly, of the human who sang, of the alien landlady who stood against soldiers, of the night when music drowned out commands. More came to Sira's house. Not just refugees, but Lutherans too. Workers with tired hands, mothers carrying children, even elders who had not left their homes in years. They all came, curious, hungry for the sound that had touched so many hearts. Jared was overwhelmed. He had never meant for this. At first, he wanted only to hold on to the last piece of his world. Now, his private grief had become something far greater. Each night when he lifted the guitar, he felt hundreds of eyes waiting, needing. The weight of it pressed on him, but it also gave him strength. Sira never left his side. She guarded the door when whispers of soldiers grew close, and she stood among the people when the songs began. Her tall figure glowed in the dim light, her voice steady when fear threatened to break others. Once Jared had thought of her only as a distant landlady. Now, he saw her as a shield, a friend, perhaps even something deeper, someone who believed in him when no one else had. One night, Jared played the softest song he knew. His voice was low, the guitar gentle. He sang not of Earth's loss, but of its beauty, green forests, blue oceans, the laughter of children. Though many in the room had never seen Earth, they wept as though they had known it all their lives. When the song ended, silence hung heavy. Then an old Lutheran elder spoke. His voice shook as he said, "This music, it makes me remember things I did not know I had forgotten. It makes me hope again." Others murmured their agreement. And Jared realized then what his father had once told him long ago. Music is not only for remembering, it is for planting seeds in soil you may never see bloom. But danger grew alongside hope. The council tried to pass laws against unregistered gatherings. Soldiers patrolled the streets near Sira's home. Threats were whispered, warnings delivered. Some said Jared should stop before it was too late. But every time he thought of putting the guitar away, he saw the faces of those who came to listen, the tired eyes, the broken spirits. He could not silence himself while they still needed his songs. One evening, as the people gathered again, Sira spoke softly to Jared. "If they take your guitar, will you still sing?" He looked at her, his hands trembling slightly on the strings. "They can take the wood. They can break the strings. But they can't stop the sound once it's inside people's hearts." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Then you are stronger than you know." That night the crowd sang with him louder than ever before. The walls shook with their voices and even the air seemed alive. It was no longer Jared alone. It was a choir of many, carrying the same fire. And outside, where soldiers once stood to intimidate, some now stopped to listen. A few lowered their weapons, just for a moment, as if caught by something they could not resist. Even those ordered to silence the boy found themselves haunted by the sound of his fragile human songs. Jared never claimed to be a leader. He was only a refugee, only a boy with a guitar. Yet through him the scattered found unity. Through him silence found a voice. Through him a galaxy remembered that hope is not crushed by steel or law. And Sira, once only a landlady, became part of that hope. Her house was no longer empty. It had become a sanctuary, a place where broken spirits gathered to heal. Years later, when people spoke of the beginning of change, they did not speak of battles or weapons. They spoke of the night an alien landlady stood against soldiers. They spoke of a human who sang of a lost world. They spoke of a guitar that became more powerful than any blade. For Jared and Sira, it began as silence, as distance, as two strangers under one roof. But in the end, it became something greater, proof that humanity's greatest weapon was never destruction. It was creation. And after that, nothing in their world or in the hearts of those who heard was ever the same again.